What's up, everybody? We are back with another episode of the Everything School podcast. I'm here, joined as always with my co-host Billy Derrick. Billy, we were talking before we started this. It feels like we just recorded, and these weeks are just kind of going by so fast.
I know it's crazy. That's what I told you. I was like, did we not just record? But no, man. I think it's a good thing though, because right now it's the dog days. We're just kind of waiting for the season to start. But we might be wanting some of this time back. Here in a few weeks when it's already week 3, and we're like, or later into the season, even where the hell did the season go? But no, man, it's I'm glad the days are going by fast. They're going to go by even faster during the season. But I'm glad to be back on with you.
Yeah, there's always that time when you get closer to probably like week 8 or 9, and you're like, man, week one felt like it was a week ago, and now we're staring down the barrel of
Yeah,
a couple more games and then a bowl week or a bowl month, and then that's it. Another long stretch of waiting until football comes back. But we're getting closer. We are, what, a week and a half away from week 0.
hmm
Uh, so we're getting there. We got a lot to talk about today. AP poll, the first official preseason AP poll is dropped. And we also have our own top tens individually. Um, very curious to see where we both went in terms of the top 10. I have a little bit of shock and awe with mine, but not too crazy. Then we're going to get into previewing week 0. Vanderbilt is taking on the Hawaii Rainbow Warriors. I love that name. One of the best names in college football. And then we're going to finish our win totals. We got 5 teams left for win totals, including both of our teams. So there's a lot to talk about today. I guess we can just jump right in. Billy, if you're ready, we can just jump right into the AP Top 25 poll. Let me pull this up because I have it right here. No, I guess at the top, nothing too crazy, especially with Georgia. I think Georgia is just an easy number one. But Billy, anything stick out to you in the top five? We can just talk about top five and go from there. Anything in the top five that sticks out to you at all?
honestly, not really. LSU at 5 is higher than I think a lot of people think. I like LSU a lot, but I think there are some people out there that are kind of slowing the train down on LSU a little bit. But yeah, Georgia, most dominant team in the country. We were talking earlier. It's kind of ridiculous how dominant they've been. I love Michigan. I'm a big Michigan fan. Not really, but this year I'm a big believer in Harbaugh and Michigan, and we'll talk about them more in my top 10. Ohio State, I don't know. That seems a little high for them, but I still like them more than Alabama at this point because they have an established quarterback. And I might even put LSU above Alabama at this point. Maybe a little tease for my release there, but no. And then you look into the top 10: USC, Penn State, Florida State, Clemson, and Washington. Um, I like USC more than some people do, I think. Penn State, I don't really understand the hype for them. I think they got a good quarterback in Drew Aller, good running back, but I don't know. James Franklin's kind of underperformed the last couple years. I love Florida State this year. I think they are one of the more dangerous teams this year with a ton coming back from last year. So I like them a lot. Clemson, I think that's a little too high for them. Now they returned their quarterback, but he was a freshman last year, and they haven't really dipped into the portal as much as some other teams have. So they're thin at some other positions. The two UTs, Texas and Tennessee, right there just outside the top 10. I think that's pretty accurate. I might have Tennessee a couple spots higher than 12 right now. But I think at least before the season, I like that. And then kind of looking past here, Oregon State's a team that no one's talking about, but they've got some talent. I think Jonathan Smith is their head coach. He's done a great job. TCU, of course, I think they're ranked 17th just because they were in the national title last year. I think they might take a deeper drop this year. And then Oklahoma, a big improvement. I expect that. North Carolina, I think their defense is awful. They might be a team that doesn't finish in the top 25. A&M, I told you this before we recorded. A&M's a team that they could finish in the top 10, but they could also finish out of the top 25 and like a fringe bowl team. Like Same with Ole Miss. Like there's a lot of teams this year that have really low floors, but also really high ceilings. So, but yeah, for the top 10 as a whole, um, Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, I like where they are. I might put LSU over Alabama, but of course we'll get to our own, top tens here in a second. But yeah, I mean, you can't take too much of these. I mean, it's the preseason. It's just a topic point for everybody to argue over. But no, I mean, I like the top five, but after that, it's anybody's game, and that's what's going to make this season really fun, I think.
Yeah, I know a lot of people don't really care for the preseason top 25s. I think they're fine. You have to have something, I think, at some point thrown out there. I want
Yeah.
to talk about I like the top five. I think Georgia's the easy one. I'm with you. I think I'm very high on Michigan. I have Michigan to be back in the playoffs this year, beat Ohio State for another third straight year, win the Big Ten again. I like I think I'm with you. Maybe moving LSU in terms of this AP poll over Alabama, but I don't know. I think Bama's still strong. I think it's a bad time. I think it's bad to doubt Alabama just because, they are who they are. Nick Saban, as long as he's there, they're going to be a steady program. But I'll like number seven, Penn State. Penn State has the ability to make a lot of noise this year. I think we say that a lot about the James Franklin led squad, but Drew Aller is coming in to replace what was it, Kevin Hogan last year? No, I don't.
No, who was it? Wow, I can't even remember who it was. It wasn't Hogan, but it definitely wasn't Aller. But they've got better quarterback play now that Aller's in there as the
Yeah,
starter.
Aller gives you a little bit more mobility. He's a younger guy. He's kind of that. He's not really a true dual threat, but he's an athlete back there in the pocket. They return a lot of guys on offense and some, they have some defensive stars to back that team up as well. So I look at Penn State and, Penn State they have a decent chance to make some noise and maybe even knock off Ohio State this year. So they're going to be dangerous. I like Florida State at 8. Florida State's my pick to win the ACC this year. Jordan Travis coming back. Heisman dark horse, maybe Heisman front runner at this point. I have a future on Jordan Travis to win the Heisman as well. So I'm all for them playing fantastic this year. Clemson at 9, especially after the Orange Bowl that just took place, them being that many spots over Tennessee is a little tough to swallow. But they this is what I don't think a lot of people are talking about this. Garrett Riley is coming in as OC, and I think Clemson's going to have something that they haven't had in a while, and that's a very dangerous offense. I think both Riley brothers are great at getting the most out of their quarterbacks. We saw that last year with Garrett at TCU. So I could see that working very well for Klubnik this year. Washington at 10. Michael Penix is a Heisman frontrunner as well. Other than that, I'm very happy with this top 25. I love Tulane getting ranked. I know some people didn't have them getting ranked. They play Ole Miss week 2. We also get LSU Florida State week 1, Bama Texas in week 2 as well. So I mean, in three
And
weeks,
and think about that, Chase. I want to throw this in here. Think about that. A lot of these AP polls over the years are created for those first couple week big matchups, right? Ole Miss and Tulane, they both got cupcakes in week 1, so they know they're going to move up in the rankings. Oh, there you go. You got a top 25 matchup, even if they don't deserve it, right? I think there's some other teams that have big matchups early in the season, like North Carolina. They really deserve to be ranked. I mean, yeah, they got a really good quarterback, um, but I mean, I don't know that they truly, deserve to be in the top 25, but they are. Um, and they've got South Carolina, so they got one ranked team in that matchup. So that's another thing to think about here that, the AP poll voters, I think, play into the big TV networks who have these matchups. They say, hey, rank these teams because, we need more eyes on this game.
I agree. I think I can't remember who it was last year, but they gave somebody a ranking, and you could immediately tell the only reason that they got that number beside their name was for TV
It
draws.
might have been Florida. Was it Florida against Utah, maybe? I think Florida might have been
I
ranked in
think it was
last year's
Florida.
AP.
It was, and I'm thinking they literally just put that there just to get eyes and
Mhm.
viewership. What I mean, good on them. They have the power to do that, but I mean, there's some times where you're looking at the ranking and you're like, they shouldn't be anywhere close to the top 25. NC State last year in the playoff rankings, their AD was like chairman of the playoffs, and they were getting stomped, and they were falling like 2, 3 spots. And that was my biggest
Yeah.
crime of last year. I don't anything whatever happened toward the top after the playoff poll. The biggest crime last year was NC State was continuously getting ranked when they shouldn't have even touched the top 25. But that's another argument for a different season. But yeah, just down the list, I think everything's fine. Wisconsin under Luke Fickell, their first year. Very excited to see what they do with Allen coming back in the backfield, and they also have Tanner Mordecai transferring in from SMU. There's a lot to love about a bunch of these teams in the top 25. Hey, we're gonna in 3 weeks, this whole thing is gonna be blown to smithereens with all those matchups at some point. Uh, but I don't know how you feel about the AP poll, Billy, but I don't think that the AP poll counts that much because you get a playoff poll in December, and that is kind of the end all be all of rankings.
Yes, you're right. But I'll say this, like say for example, I don't know, let's go with Washington, right? They're preseason number 10. So all of a sudden, their floor is higher than um say there's another Pac-12 team that makes a run deep into the season, the playoff, but they're way behind. They're not even in the top 25 preseason in the AP. It sort of sets the levels, right? Because we don't get a playoff ranking to start the season, but the AP poll sort of sets the levels, saying, okay, here's your best teams in the country, top 25 teams in the country. These are the teams we expect to be in contention for the playoff. But if there's a team that's ranked, I don't know, 40th or 50th right now, it's a little bit harder for them to make some headway. It just is. So I agree with you that the college football playoff poll, I mean, that's a fact. That's the one that matters. But I'll say that the AP poll sort of sets the levels and it holds a little bit of importance, not a ton. But I just think it's easier for Washington to sort of stay there because they started there, right? And if they start the season 5-0, 6-0, they could be in the top five. So all of a sudden, I don't know, it just sort of sets the levels before the season starts. It's not super important, but I think it's something to keep in mind.
I kind of wish we would get the playoff poll a little bit earlier than December. I feel like December kind of hampers us to a
Yeah,
very small amount of the season. Uh, but maybe with the
it's
expanded
all about
playoffs, maybe
TV. It's all about that first reveal.
you are correct. I mean, it's drama. It's always drama. I
Yeah.
wonder if when they expand, if we'll get a earlier ranking. I don't know what their plan for that is. Probably not. Probably they probably still love the TV numbers.
Whatever's best for TV.
Let me end that screen sharing. Okay, so I think it's a good time as any to get into our top tens. Billy, I'm gonna let you go with your official. We're gonna try to do this weekly, do our top tens, make it different. So our first annual preseason top 10. Billy, lead us off with. We can alternate this. We can go 1 and 1, or we can go straight through 10. It's however you want to go. But Billy, give me your top 10.
Okay, here we go. I'll just run through my top 10. I'll try to do it rather quickly. I know I talked about a lot of these at the top, but number one, I'm going to have Georgia, the most dominant team in the country the past few years. And I told you before we got on, I think they're even more dominant than Alabama was in their heyday with Carson Beck at quarterback, a guy that has a ton of talent. But that's a little bit of a drop off from Stetson Bennett. I think Stetson Bennett is going to be tough to replace. Maybe the first half of the season, Georgia isn't as crisp, but the good news is they've got one of the lighter schedules in the country. So, the biggest test for them is on the road in Knoxville against Tennessee. So, again, best trenches units in the country, best offensive line, best D line. I still think that's true, and no matter who's at running back, they're going to have a lot of success. Dejan Edwards, I think, is his name. Really good player. Brock Bowers, I think, is the best player in the country. So I've got Georgia number one. Number two, Michigan. I'm really, really high on Michigan. They return a ton from last year, pretty much everybody. They return basically everybody who was meaningful off of a playoff team that, you know, I mean, they were this close to beating Georgia. I mean, with if you didn't have a couple of McCarthy interceptions, I mean, I think they might have beaten Georgia. So, I'm saying I got it totally mixed up. TCU is the team they played. Oh my gosh, it's late, Chase. Okay, so they beat TCU, so that proves my point even more, right? This is a team that, oh my gosh, I'm okay. They lost to TCU. What is going on right now? So they lost to TCU, but they very well could have won that game, right? So I just think Michigan is a team that returns a lot. I love McCarthy. He was really good last year, other than a few interceptions here or there that cost his team, right? Blake Corum, arguably the best running back in the country. They've got Donovan Edwards too, a guy that has a ton of skill, great offensive line, good defense. I love Michigan this year, even though I couldn't describe their season last year at all. But they did lose to TCU. Okay, number three, Ohio State. I've got Ohio State at number three because of what happened last year, right? I think they've got a ton of motivation, a ton of just fire coming into this season. They've got a chip on their shoulder after what happened last year, the loss to Michigan. I mean, let's not forget they almost beat Georgia in the semifinal, right? So, I mean, just like Michigan, they were a play or two away from being in the national title. And a lot of people thought that might happen with Ohio State and Michigan. Um, I don't know much about Kyle McCord, their quarterback, but I mean he was a highly recruited guy. He's got a ton of talent. They got the best receiving core in the country easily. Marvin Harrison Jr., Emeka Egbuka. I mean they've got a ton of weapons. So I like Ohio State this year. Number four, Florida State, and I know that might surprise some people, and I think it's surprising you right now. But
I'm not
Chase, let me
against
tell
it
you
though.
this. Let me tell you this. They return the most statistical production out of any team in the country. Jordan Travis is back, as you said, dark horse Heisman candidate. Trey Benson at running back is one of the best backs in the country. They got a duo at receiver, Keon Coleman, a transfer, and then Johnny Wilson, a transfer as well, who are, I mean, two of the better receivers in the country. So they've got a ton of weapons for a stud quarterback. So this offense is going to be great. I think the big question is the defense, right? How, can they take those steps to be a playoff team? I think they can. I love Mike Norvell. I love what he's doing down there. I like Florida State, and I guess that means they're in my playoff this year. So I like Florida State a lot. Number five, Alabama. I mean, yes, I think they're going to miss the playoff again. The quarterback situation worries me. I just don't see a guy in there that is dangerous or prolific enough to lead Alabama to the playoff. Now, that doesn't mean Alabama's going to be a bad team. I still think they're a top five team in the country. I think there'll be another borderline playoff year for Alabama this year. But Ty Simpson, Jalen Milroe, or Tyler Buckner, take your pick. I don't know if anyone really has a good read on it. I would bet on Ty Simpson, but he's still a sophomore and is largely unproven. So I don't know. I'm not saying they're dead or Nick Saban's going to retire after the season, but I don't know. I don't see the fire and the elite depth out of Alabama this year. I still think they're a top five team, though. Number six, USC. Their defense is still going to be really bad. I just don't like they don't know how to tackle. It's almost like they don't practice tackling at USC. But Caleb Williams is still their quarterback, right? He's reigning Heisman Trophy winner. I don't think he wins it again, but I mean, I think he's a guy that has some Patrick Mahomes traits in him, right? Just kind of his do it all ability. I still like USC at number seven, and maybe this might be too low. I know I talked LSU up, but I actually realized I've got him at seven here. Jaden Daniels at quarterback. I love him. I don't know if he's big enough to he might get hurt this year, and they've got to go to Garrett Nussmeier, who actually played really well last year, but I think that takes them down a rung. So can Daniels sustain the physical play in the SEC? I mean, he did last year, so maybe he proves me wrong there. I mean, they've got some stars. LSU's got a lot of talent. Malik Neighbors at receiver, Harold Perkins on defense, who's an All-American. I love LSU this year. Number 8, Penn State. I've got Penn State at number 8. Like you said earlier, Drew Aller is a ton of talent. Can he perform though in the bright lights against Ohio State and Michigan? Nick Singleton at running back, a really good player. But Penn State, I don't know. They're a fringe top 5 team for me. I need to see it before I believe it. Number 9, Clemson. I like Cade Klubnik a lot. I just don't think Clemson has the depth they're used to having, over the past decade. Early in that run with Dabo, where they had, great defenses, better secondary. Their secondary was awful last year. There were a couple games where they just got picked apart, especially that Tennessee game. I like Will Shipley though at running back. They've still got a really good defense. So I got Clemson at number 9 and number 10. Chase, your Tennessee Volunteers. I'm throwing them in the top 10. I like them. I love what Josh Heupel's doing. I think Joe Milton is going to be serviceable. I think he's going to do what they need from him. He's not going to be Hendon Hooker. He's not going to be Peyton Manning, but I think he's going to do exactly what they need. And my God, I mean, you've got 4 receivers that, I mean, that might be that might be one of maybe the best receiving corps in the country. Brew McCoy, that nobody's talking about. I mean, well, I say nobody. There's obviously talk about it, but not as the best in the country. They could be the best in the country. Now, Ohio State, that's tough to beat, but man, I think Tennessee's a close second there. As I said, Brew McCoy, Cora White, Ramel Keaton, Dante Thornton. I like that tight end. What's his name?
Jacob Warren.
Jacob Warren. I just think but this is where it gets a little tricky for me. Their offensive line, I've heard some concerns about their offensive line in fall camp. I don't know about Cooper Mays and when he'll be back. So I think that's a big question. I think they'll be better defensively. So not super confident in it, but I think Tennessee, like if they go 10-2, that's a top 10 team. So, and I think they can. So there it is. My top 10, just to run through it again: Georgia, number 1, Michigan, number 2, Ohio State, number 3, Florida State, number 4, Alabama, number 5, and then rounding it out, USC, LSU, Penn State, Clemson, and Tennessee to round out my top 10.
Just a touch while we're talking about this. Cooper Mays had a small procedure last week, right before their first scrimmage. Hype said probably about 2 weeks. They're thinking he's going to be ready for the Virginia game. Who knows? But yes, offensive line for the Volunteers is a very big concern right now. They don't have the depth like they used to have. Heupel's really never had a backup center, and he still doesn't this year, really. Last year, I think it was either Spraggins or Crawford had shifted it down to center when Cooper Mays was out. But it's a concern. It's a very major concern. There are some guys who have transferred in that look like they're going to start. But I think they get it down pat, and I think they get it ready for the season. To start my top 10 out, Tennessee fans are probably going to hate me, actually, for this entire top 10. Number 1, I think Georgia, easy number 1. We're talking about this before we got on here and started recording. Georgia is primed to repeat for the first time since Minnesota did it in the 30s. Do they or do they not? That's the big question, because you look at it and think, man, Georgia, there's no way that they three-peat. There's no way we get another three-peat. And then you look at the roster and the team, you're like, and especially the schedule, and you're thinking, yeah, they're probably going to three-peat. Number 2, like I said, looking at the AP Top 25, I'm also big on Michigan. I think they have the Donovan Edwards and Blake Corum, by far and away the best running back room in the country.
Yeah.
I think both those guys. I mean, Corum was talking about, was talked about as a Heisman finalist last year. Gets hurt, and a lot of guys think he's going to the NFL, and he comes back unfinished business, and that team is just very scary. I like McCarthy, but I don't think McCarthy is really going to be the catalyst for them this year. I think they're going to beat teams with their physical run game and their offensive line. And I love football teams like that. I love just smash mouth football. So you're going to get that a lot with Michigan. Number 3, I have Ohio State. I think my top 5 is basically the AP top 5. I didn't think there's anything crazy with it. Ohio State at 3, Bama at 4, LSU at 5. Now, the back end of my top 10 is where we get a little bit different. Number 6, I have Penn State. I love Penn State. I think they have Drew Aller. I want to call him Aller, but it's pronounced Aller apparently. So Drew Aller is coming in for Sean Clifford, replacing Sean Clifford from last year. He's got a lot more mobility than Clifford had last year, and this team is coming off of a great Rose Bowl win against Utah. So James Franklin, it has his team primed and ready to maybe make a run at the Big Ten. I feel like we say that a lot though with James Franklin. I know Billy, y'all are very familiar with that
Yeah.
man from his time at Vanderbilt. But Penn State, I like them at number 6. Number 7, this is where it gets a little weird for my top 10. Number 7, I have the Washington Huskies. I am
Don't hate it.
I'm kind of liking Washington. I know I heard some people talk about maybe them winning the Pac-12. If USC's defense what is as bad this year as it was last year, and Michael Penix continues uh his trajectory upwards, that actually could happen. I could see Washington beating USC in the Pac-12 title game. I have USC winning it, but I wouldn't be surprised if Washington makes some noise and takes over USC for that Pac-12 title spot. Speaking of USC at number 8, I have the Trojans. Like you said, Caleb Williams. That's it. That's all you need. Anybody else? I mean, you have Jerry Rice's son, Brendan Rice, coming back again after having a pretty solid year last year. The defense, like you said, the defense is the main story. That they can't tackle anybody. They got ran over by Utah last year in that Pac-12 title game. Caleb Williams seemed to, the games that they lost, he was taken out, he was hurt, he was limping in some of those losses last year. But I don't, like you said, reigning Heisman Trophy winner. I don't think they'll ever do another repeat Heisman Trophy winner. We had Archie Griffin do it at Ohio State. I just don't think
Yeah.
we'll ever see that again. You could look at Manziel the year after he won the Heisman Trophy was way better statistically than the year he actually won the trophy. So I just don't think repeat winners are a thing anymore. Number 9, speaking of Heisman Trophy um, favorites this year, Florida State and Jordan Travis coming in at number 9. I'm not too crazy about Florida State, as a lot of people are in terms of, national championship hopes. I think they win the ACC, but I think the ACC again is down on its luck again this year, just as they were last year. I think Clemson and Florida State will be a fantastic matchup. Also, ACC doesn't have divisions this year, so we're more than likely going to get that rematch in the ACC title game. So you're looking at Clemson, Florida State, probably part 2 at some point throughout the year. And then at
Mhm.
number 10, I have a team in orange, but it's not my team. It is the Clemson Tigers
Mm.
coming in at number 10. Like I said, I like Garrett Riley coming into that offense. I like what he has done at TCU last year with Max Duggan. I like what the Riley brothers do with quarterbacks. They always maximize those guys. They're very good offensively. Maybe very good, probably a little stretch. I love the receivers. I think they're all dangerous. And they just, they bring back a quarterback who didn't look terrible last year. I think he should have probably started for DJ a little earlier in the season. But
Yeah.
I think Dabo is a my guy kind of coach where, hey, that's my guy. I don't really want to mess with him. And I think he eventually had to get rid of DJ. So I think I have them at 10, Tennessee at 11. I'm always very scared of, ranking the Volunteers too high because it always hurts at the end of the year when you look back and look at that. But yeah, Tennessee, don't worry, everybody. They're just right outside the top 10 at number 11. I'm sure they'll creep in at some point. But yeah, that's my top 10. I'll run it down again. Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, Bama, LSU, nothing crazy there. Penn State, Washington, USC, Florida State, and Clemson to round out my top 10. And I think in a couple weeks, I'm so excited for like week 5 when both of our top tens are just completely different because every chaos is unfolded and the world is crumbling at that point. But yeah, that is both of our top tens. The first annual top 10. We will keep doing that weekly, so you guys stay tuned for that. But Billy, I want to transition a little bit because, like I said, we're a week and a half away from week 0, and your boys have a game. Your boys have a
Mhm.
game week 0, August 26th. So let's talk about that a little bit. Vanderbilt is taking on the Hawaii Rainbow Warriors, like I mentioned at the start of the show. There's a lot going on with Hawaii. Uh, they're going through a lot right now. But just Billy, what's some insight and give us some insight and some keys to the victory for Vanderbilt, and if you have anything on Hawaii as well.
Yeah, you mentioned it's kind of been a rough patch for them, not only with all the Pac-12 realignment, around them, sort of on that West Coast, but also, the recovery efforts after the devastating wildfire fires in Maui, and as a result, Vanderbilt is going to support that. They announced that a portion of the proceeds from each ticket sold to this game is going to be donated to the Hawaii Community Foundation's Maui Strong Fund. So, and you can actually make a donation on Vanderbilt's website, vucommodores.com, if you'd like to. Don't have to be a Vandy fan, but I think that's a good gesture by Vanderbilt. In terms of Hawaii, honestly, I don't know a ton. I'm kind of going off of what we saw from them in week 0 last year. That was year one, game number one for Timmy Chang. And, Clark Lee actually talked about that today. We had him on the George Plaster show. And, he talked about how he's kind of using this year two matchup versus Hawaii, the Rainbow Warriors coming into year two under Timmy Chang, as reference. He's using that, trying to look back at his program, how much better they were from year one to year two. And that was a big jump for Vanderbilt. And he said that he expects Hawaii to come in here with a chip on their shoulder after losing 63-10 last year. They don't want to be embarrassed again in front of the country. I mean, let's face it, it's week 0. There's a lot of college football fans out there that'll be watching whatever game is on, and it happens to be Hawaii and Vanderbilt on the SEC network. I'm sure there'll be some other SEC fans tuning in. But yeah, night kickoff. Vanderbilt right now is an 18-point favorite. I would pick them to cover right now. I don't think it's going to be 63-10, but I just think Vanderbilt is gonna be too dominant on offense. I've seen a lot from that offense in fall camp that makes me believe they will be able to score at will on Hawaii. The over under is 56. I mean, I think Vanderbilt might come close to that on its own. I don't think they'll get to 63. I think they could be in the 40s, maybe even the 50s. I think they're going to score a ton. But yeah, in terms of this Hawaii team, they do return a decent quarterback in Braden Shager, a junior who is a big kid. He's 6'3", 220 pounds. He didn't play awful last year in terms of his stats. And now they did go 3-9 and 2-6 in their conference last year. But when you look at this team, they don't have any depth, right? They lost a ton of guys before Timmy Chang even got there. They're a little bit bigger on defense, but they've got a tough start to this season at Vanderbilt, and then they got to play Stanford at home. But yeah, I mean, last year, Chase, if you look at their schedule, lost 63-10 to Vandy, and then they turned around and lost 49-17 to Western Kentucky, 56-10 at Michigan. They beat Duquesne, who I didn't even know had a football team. They lost at New Mexico State by about 20. They beat Nevada. I mean, that's a decent win. They were a 6-point underdog in that game. They ended up beating UNLV late in the season. So, I mean, they were able to get 3 wins out of last season, which I know it's not great, but I mean, I think after watching that Vanderbilt game, I said this team's going 0-12. I don't think they're going to beat anybody. But yeah, so I think they took a small step last year. They'll be ready to play. They're going to come in here to Nashville in about 10 days and be ready to play. So I think Vanderbilt's going to have to be ready to play as well. But yeah, I like Vanderbilt a lot right now. I think their offense is clicking on all cylinders. I think they will be clicking against Hawaii. I will pick them to cover the 18 and hit the over. And Chase, I think they might get close on their own, just hit that over. So yeah, in terms of keys to the game, I'll probably have more, more than I have right now next week, just because I'll be looking into them a little bit deeper in the matchup. But Clark Lee did tell us on the show today that their first day of prep for Hawaii is Friday. So they're going to start Hawaii prep Friday, and then they'll of course roll into it next week. But Yeah, Chase. I mean, I expect them to come ready to play. This Vanderbilt defense struggled last year. I think they'll continue to struggle on the boundaries this year. So Hawaii might score some points. I just think Vanderbilt's going to score. They might score every other possession. I just think that's how I like this offense right now as they match up with Hawaii. So yeah, I like Vanderbilt matchup, but Hawaii will be better. I don't think it'll be as big of a blowout as it was last year.
I'm also you want to you talk about spread and over under, man, that just gets me so fired up for week 0. I will put some action on that Vanderbilt game. I think cover absolutely for sure. I'm a big over guy, you know. I love the quote, you know, life's too short to bet the under. So always bet the over. So
Yeah.
I'll have action on both of that. I'm excited to watch Vanderbilt in Hawaii. I watched that game last year, and correct me if I'm wrong, that game was kind of a little close to start out, and then I checked
Yep.
back and I was like, man,
Yeah, it was close. I mean, Vanderbilt, I think the first possession they gave up a long touchdown drive to Hawaii, and it was like, oh my gosh, what just happened? Is Vanderbilt is this are they in for a dogfight? But at halftime, and they showed this on an SEC featured last year. At halftime, Clark just he lit into them, and I mean, they had some momentum heading into the half with a fumble recovery, I think. And they had another fumble recovery in the third quarter. I think they had like 35 points in the third quarter. They just put it on them in that third quarter, and that was kind of a set the tone type game. So yeah, Chase, Hawaii's going to score. I think they'll score more than 10, but Vanderbilt might just get close to 63 again. I don't know much about Hawaii's defense. I don't think that's a good thing, right? I mean, you know, Hawaii doesn't have really any noteworthy players. Braden Shager is their quarterback. I like Timmy Chang, though, their head coach. He was a really good player at Hawaii. That's another interesting thing about this game. Both head coaches played at their respective schools. So a lot of passion on the sidelines. And I think it's going to be a good start to the season for Vanderbilt. So, yeah, it is fun talking about spreads and over-unders right now.
a lot of if anybody is an old school football fan, people might know Tommy Chang's name. He was a great quarterback at Hawaii. I think right
He
like
was, yeah.
leading into Colt Brennan in those teams. But he
Yeah.
was kind of like one of the original Hawaii quarterbacks that, you know, Marcus Mariota kind of reminds you of, or, you know,
Yeah.
even a even Nico reminds you of. So I'm very
Yeah. And,
excited
and
about that.
he, yeah, he threw it. They threw it around the yard with him. I mean, he was a really good quarterback. And so that's why I look at this matchup and say, okay, Hawaii might be able to move the football and score a few times, put some points on the board. I just don't think they'll be able to stop Vanderbilt. But yeah, Timmy Chang's a good coach, and Clark said that today. So yeah, they'll be ready to play. They'll be ready to go. I just don't know what that means in terms of the scoreboard.
So we've got that game to look forward to. We'll get into a little bit more prediction wise next week. We're gonna save that for next week as we approach week 0 of the college football season. There's a lot of games going on in week 0. Billy, real quick, how do you feel about week 0? I feel like that's a very new thing. I remember the first week 0 game that I can remember being like hyped up was Florida Miami a couple years ago.
Yeah, I don't know. It kind of is what it is. I like it just because it's college football, and I'll watch it. I like it this year though. I like Saturday, August 26th. You get started with the first game of the year, Navy, Notre Dame, and Dublin. I mean that's a fun matchup. Get to see what Sam Hartman looks like for the Irish early in the afternoon, and then you get Vandy at night, and then you get started Thursday night with Florida and Utah. That starts week 1 though. But also late game 7 o'clock. It's the bad thing is it's on the Pac-12 network, so I won't be watching, but I'll be tuning into the highlights. USC in action against San Jose State with Caleb Williams. See what he looks like in year 2. But it's funny. The first game on American soil is not Navy Notre Dame. It is UTEP at Jacksonville State in down in Alabama. That'll be a hot one. 4:30 kickoff. So that's technically the first game on American soil. Yeah, it's not the best slate of games, but you also look at week 0, and it's not really about the talent level of these teams. I just think it's about football being back, and I like this little tradition of having a game in Dublin, and I think it's a nice showing for Notre Dame. I mean, that's going to be a ton of Notre Dame fans out there in Dublin, and then you get Vanderbilt, Hawaii. So I like this Saturday of week 0 to start it. It's kind of an appetizer, get your feet wet with college football, get used to watching the game again, and then get going. But yeah, it is what it is. I don't usually get too hyped up for it just because it's you're not at week 1 yet. You're there, but you're not all the way there yet. So, but no, this year in particular, I love it. I'm looking forward to it.
Feel like week 0 has become the appetizer for college football. A little teaser action. Well, hey, so a little bit. We're not going to spoil you too much, but hey, there's a couple games here and there. We're going to get you excited, and then we're going to hit you really hard. Thursday. We're going to absolutely kill you Saturday and Monday. Or
Yeah,
no, Saturday
and
and
and and,
Sunday.
and yeah, another thing to remember about week 0 is week 1 is going to be better football than week 0. Number one, because of the talent, you've got more teams playing, better matchups. But number two, it's another week to rest, get ready, plan, prepare for your matchup. For those teams playing in week 0, they had to start fall camp earlier, a whole week earlier. That's why you saw Vanderbilt start camp earlier. So it's a little bit more of a challenge. I think for Vanderbilt, it's good that they got to test it out last year playing in week 0. But I get the sense Clark Lee is excited to get these week 0 games out of the way. Of course, this was a Derek Mason scheduled home and home with Hawaii. I don't think you'll see any of these under Clark Lee from now on. But no, that's another part of the challenge. It's a little bit harder because you get one less week than most other teams. I know they start camp earlier, so technically not. But I think that's another challenge to look at.
So next week we will be predicting the Vanderbilt Hawaii game along with a couple other games for week 0. But as of right now, Saturday, August 26th at 6:30 p.m. from Nashville, Tennessee, Vanderbilt taking on Hawaii. Very excited, very happy. I think let's do a little another transition here until we've okay. So like the past 2-3 weeks, we've been talking about win total over unders. I don't know about you, Billy. I love spreads. I love odds. I love all of that stuff so much. And another like wrinkle in the system is last year I discovered win total over unders before the season even started. That's a game changer.
I love this segment, man. This is awesome.
I'm so excited about this. We have 5 teams, our final 5 teams. Both of our teams, we're gonna save them for last. We have one team that's kind of random. We've talked about this before. It's a very random team to get thrown in with these 5. But I'm a lot of sorts here because I'm so excited about win totals. That's AP poll. Here it is. All right, I got it. All right, so we're gonna start out with one of the West teams. Okay, I will say this before we get into this team. Mike Leach was one of the greatest personalities of college football. Every interview he did was so fun and so engaging. He had an opportunity to be a head coach at Tennessee a couple regimes ago. It never ended up happening. I would have loved to have Leach in orange and white for just one season. Uh, Before we start with Mississippi State, just wanted to say the college football world is going to be so different going forward, and especially this year, without one of the best personalities that kept it going and kept it bright. So this team, Mississippi State, they're rebounding from that loss of Coach Mike Leach. They're over under right now at 6.5. So Billy, what do you think of Mississippi State over under 6.5?
Well, first off, gone too soon, man. Mike Leach just an absolute legend in the college football game. It was weird not seeing him up at the podium at SEC Media Days. I was there 2 years ago in Atlanta, and he was. I mean, what a guy! I think he said like 7 words and was like, "All right, open up the questions." So, Mike Leach, he'll be missed as you said, but that creates a tough challenge this year for Mississippi State. I like their head coach Zach Arnett, but he's a different style, right? He's more of a physical ground and pound type coach. Obviously, they're going to throw the football still because they've got one of the better quarterbacks in the conference with Will Rogers. But I don't. They've got a tough schedule, right? I mean, all these SEC teams have a tough schedule. You're in the SEC, but they've got a really tough stretch. I think really in the first half of the season, they got a couple cupcakes with Southeast Louisiana and Arizona, but weeks 3, 4, and 5, man, good luck. LSU at home, at South Carolina, and then Alabama at home. So buckle up, state fans. That might be a tough stretch. It slows down a little bit. Western Michigan at home, at Arkansas, at Auburn. That I think that should be a win for Mississippi State. Kentucky at home. I like them in that matchup. At A&M, I don't know about that one. It could be tough. Southern Miss at home. So Chase, this is tough. This is cutting it close for me. I really want to give Mississippi State 7 wins. It's just hard. I don't, and I know they were good last year. They were 9-4 last year, and they've got a lot of guys back. They got Tulu Griffin at receiver, who I really like. Woody Marks at running back. Will Rogers, as I said. I don't know. I think this will take a toll. The passing of Leach, and yeah, I think they'll be motivated this year. And I want to give them 7 wins, but I can't. I like that LSU game is tough at home. At South Carolina is tough. Alabama at home is tough. At Arkansas, a team that's really, really good. I like them this year. At A&M, and then Ole Miss. I mean, Ole Miss is going to want revenge this year. So it's a tough schedule, man. So I'm going to go under 6.5 for the Bulldogs.
I think I am also with you on that one. I actually, this is gonna sound crazy. I would have them under 6. I think I have them at coming in at 5-7. Like you said, a very tough schedule. It's hard to rebound when you lose a guy like Mike Leach, especially
Mm-hmm.
he. I remember last year. I don't remember what game it was, but the receivers were kind of sitting down. He was kind of getting tired of it. So he walks over, takes the folding chairs, folds them up, and puts them, on the ground. I
Yeah.
mean, that's just a guy who holds his team accountable. And to have that kind of leadership, especially he recruited a lot of these guys. I know Will Rogers was emotional during their bowl game win last year, and I like Will Rogers a lot. I love the way he plays football. He's a true gunslinger in every form of the word gunslinger, but it's too tough of a schedule, and coming off of that emotional loss of your head coach, I think all of that kind of factors in. I have them going 5-7 this year. Hopefully not. Hopefully I'm wrong. I would love to be wrong on this one. This is the one team that I'm completely fine missing the mark on. But yeah, I have them at 5-7, and it's going to be an interesting year for the Bulldogs. Uh, Speaking of Bulldogs, since I've said that word, I'm going to skip one team and come back to them. Let's just talk about, the elephant in the room, the juggernaut. 11.5 for Georgia, over under. Billy, this might be the easiest one. Maybe not.
Yeah, I'm going over. I just they're too good, man. I mean, looking at their schedule, it's kind of laughable. I went through this magazine I've got, and wrote they've got this open win loss column where you can write in your predictions. And it was a joke going through it. I mean, it was WWWWW, and then I got to that game in Knoxville on November 18th. I had to think longer than just 2 seconds on that one, and I think that's saying something. I think how does Brock Bowers, not Bowers, how does Carson Beck respond to that atmosphere? I mean, it was hard enough for Bryce Young to go into Knoxville last year, and he's damn Bryce Young. Um, Carson Beck's he's a young kid, man, and I know he's going to go through a whole season. So that's the only test for Georgia. I think they get by Tennessee. I think they go 12-0. But the other thing about this is, Chase, people say, "Oh, you've got a cupcake schedule." You've got to go out there and beat these teams. I mean, if the schedule to any other team other than Georgia, we might be saying, okay, this is a tough schedule, tough stretch here with, Florida, Mizzou, Ole Miss, Tennessee. It depends, man. I mean, yeah, it's a lighter schedule, but you still got to go out there and play these teams and beat them. I think they could slip up. At Auburn, who knows what Auburn looks like this year? The game in Jacksonville against Florida, that's usually competitive. I know last year I don't think it was, but you never know in the SEC. So obviously the game in Knoxville, that's the only game that's a test. Other than that, you can Sharpie the Bulldogs in for over 11.5.
So, like you said, you look at this schedule, and you think, man, W's, 12-0 cupcake schedule. Shout out Lee Corso, because not so fast, because this is my hot take for the season. The boys in the orange and white are taking out Georgia. I'm calling it. Give me the under. Georgia, you're not going to have it. You're going to come into the real stadium. You claimed last year that Sanford, whatever your crappy stadium's called, you said it was the hardest place to play. Show up in Knoxville and see what happens, because you're getting beat. That is my prediction. Give me the under. That's my hot take for the season. So, yeah, I realistically think under. I think Tennessee beats Georgia this year. That's their only loss. But, yeah. So, give me the under. Technically the under. Yeah, 11.5. So, yes,
So you're
I'm
not
going.
you're not kidding here.
No, I'm not kidding. I'm legitimately serious. I'll get more into Tennessee's schedule at the end here. But, yes, Tennessee's beating Georgia. You can call those hedges at crappy stadium that you have the best place to play. You got lucky that it rained, because we would have beat you last year. We're going to beat you this year. I'm so excited. Give me the under. Speaking of teams that Tennessee beat, shout out Alabama. Alabama over under 10.5.
Oh, I love it. Chase is on a roll. I'm gonna go. God, where did I wrote this down somewhere? Okay, Alabama. I'm going over 10.5. That's kind of low. I would have thought it would be set at least 11. So for that to be at 10.5, and again, I know I have Alabama at number 5 in my top 10, but I mean, I think I'm going over. And Chase, I think Alabama could go undefeated this year. Little hot take. I believe that, and they've got some tests. That Texas at home is going to be tough. At Mississippi State, not going to be easy. At A&M, not going to be easy. Tennessee at home, we know damn well that's not going to be easy. LSU at home, and then at Auburn, that's never easy. So they've got some potential slip ups, but after last year, man, they've got a chip on their shoulder. This is a brand new Alabama. So I think Alabama's going to come into this season with a ton of momentum, ton of excitement and juice. Even though, and I'm saying this because of Nick Saban. I don't even think they have a ton of like superstars. I mean, Dallas Turner's really good on defense, and I guess they've got a couple good receivers on offense, and they've always got good running backs. I don't know, the Chase. They don't have the star-studded players that I think Saban's used to having. But again, I'm going over 10.5 for Bama. That's like taking candy from a baby.
Well, consider me a baby, because I have the under of 10.5. I will not say, I won't say this, because you look at Texas. We'll start off with Texas. That's their first test. Sark, like I said earlier, I don't trust Sark and I don't trust Texas. But if there's ever a game that Texas kind of starts their ascension, if they're going to have one, this is the game. I mean, it's on the road for Texas. So you're going into Tuscaloosa, very hostile crowd in week 2. But I'm going to give Bama a loss there. I'm going to have Bama starting 1-1. Then I'm going to get crazy a little bit as well. Ole Miss. Ole Miss is kind of, if there's anybody that's kind of made Nick Saban sweat more than Kirby Smart, it might just be Lane Kiffin. I think Lane is the complete solar opposite of Nick Saban in terms of personality and the way that they carry themselves. But at the same time, Lane respects Nick so much, and I love their Twitter. Well, it's not really an exchange; it's more Lane on Twitter. I love Lane's tweets about Nick Saban. They kind of have that like father son, grandpa grandson kind of relationship going on. But I'm gonna take Ole Miss again on the road in Tuscaloosa. I might be nuts for saying that. And then you get down to October 21st. And what did I do last time when we were talking about Georgia? I put this hat on and I screamed that we were beating Georgia. Not so fast because I think Bama gets their get back this year. I think we beat one of the two teams. We'll talk about, like I said, we'll talk about that more in a minute. Bama beats Tennessee at home this year. I think we're about to get into a boxing match over the next couple years with these two teams where we're just going to trade wins back and forth. I'm so excited about that. But that's if you said chip on their shoulder. That's probably the biggest chip on their shoulder. You could argue LSU, but I think Tennessee is the biggest chip on Alabama's shoulder this year, just because of how that game went, the 16-year streak, getting beat, the storming of the field, the goalposts going in the water. If there's one team that Alabama wants to absolutely destroy, it's us in the orange and white. So I'm giving Bama that game. LSU, like I said last week, LSU is my pick to win the West, so I'm going to go LSU there to make it Bama 3 losses. But other than that, I think they have a pretty sound schedule. Auburn is not going to really do much for them. Kentucky, by that point in the season, that's toward the end of the season. Kentucky's always at that point they've fallen off of a cliff. So it's not the toughest schedule for Alabama, but they've got some tests with Texas early, Ole Miss pretty early, and then even the back end with Tennessee and LSU back to back. So yeah, I like Bama going under, but not by much. But I'm not going to be surprised if Bama wins 10 games. I say this now, and Nick Saban's going to win another title, and I'm going to sit here and cry later on next year at this point.
This is the
So
rat poison Nick Saban talks about.
yeah, Nick Saban, I hope you. There's no way you see this, but if you see this, we're coming. We're coming for you. You're going 9-3. Uh, it's finally the time after the last 2 weeks we've been doing these win total over and unders. We saved both of our teams for last because we probably could sit here and talk until the sun rose tomorrow morning about both of our teams and both of our teams' seasons. Billy, I want to start with Vanderbilt. I hope that's okay with you. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Over under. I love. We were looking at Vanderbilt's schedule the other night, and we're talking about over under. At some point, this is shocking. The original over under for Vanderbilt was a whole win down from what it is now at 2.5, and I thought that was the easiest money that anybody could ever give you. But now it's at 3.5. So I'm interested to see what you take here, Billy. Over under 3.5.
I mean, put your mortgage on this. I mean, if I were to ever, I'm really not a big better, but if I were to ever place a large sum of money on a bet, it would be this. I mean, last year over under was 2.5. They were over by November. I mean, they were that's what they said. That was kind of a social media trend over by November, and Vanderbilt was. So, I think they're ahead in the build, right? I mean, they got 5 wins last year, 2 SEC wins. And the over under was 2.5, right? That was predicted win total. So 3.5 this year. Chase, I think they get to a bowl. Now that's not going to be easy, right? I think I can say that it's obviously easier said than done, but the 4 non-conference games are pretty light and pretty manageable. I mean, Hawaii, Alabama A&M, and UNLV. And then you got Wake Forest. Wake Forest is the game week 3 that I'm looking at as um, a potential make or break for the season, right? I know later in the season you still got opportunities to win and beat an SEC team, but you start your season with 4 non-conference games. So that's how you want to start a season, right? But then you get into the gauntlet of 8 straight SEC games. But even the SEC slate starts pretty manageable. Kentucky and Missouri at home. I mean, you can't really ask for much more there. And they beat Kentucky last year. They should have beat Missouri last year. So I think those 2 games right there, we're going to look back at and say, okay, how'd they do against Kentucky and Missouri? Right? If they went 1-1, might be in a bowl. If they went 2-0, they're definitely in a bowl. If they go 0-2, makes it a little bit tougher. Then you got to go and pull an upset at Florida or against Auburn at home, or even at South Carolina. So the stretch, though, Chase, is, and I think it starts with Florida. The game in Gainesville, it's never easy to go into Gainesville and win. And then Georgia at home, at Ole Miss. Vanderbilt typically plays Ole Miss close, but Ole Miss is still really prolific on offense. That Auburn game is a sleeper pick for me. Auburn, I like Hugh Freeze a lot, but I don't see the talent there. So I think that Auburn game for Vanderbilt is a golden opportunity for them, similar to last year's Florida game. Last year's Florida game, Florida just gave up. I mean, they did not want to be there. They had packed in their season, and they end up not even making a bowl. And I think Auburn, if things don't go well for them in the first half of the season, they might be packed in. Come that game in Nashville against Vanderbilt. Tough end of the season at Carolina and at Tennessee, but Chase, put your mortgage on this, man. Over 3.5. I think Vandy gets to 6 wins, and Clark Lee keeps building. So again, and that'd be massive. That would be absolutely massive for Vandy fans everywhere, and just continue to build and keep pushing. I know the construction's going on right now, but it's kind of symbolic, right? The margins are still small for this program, right? I mean, they could get to 6-6, but they might win a couple games by a combined 4 points, like 5 points. I don't think they're really going to blow any SEC teams out, but I think they can get 3 SEC wins. And but if they win all 4 non-conference, they would only need 2 to get to a bowl game, and I think that's more manageable. So they got to win their 4 non-conference. That's the kicker here, right? If they slip up against Wake, then you got to win 3 SEC games. So the margins are still small, but yeah, I got Vandy getting to a bowl game, and I got them going way over 3.5.
I was while you were discussing the your side of the over under, I went and found some more. I went and found another over under for Vanderbilt. So these odds for over under 3.5, over 3.5 is at -175. Pretty solid odds in favor of Vanderbilt. And then you look at this one, conference wins. Billy, if you had to guess what Vanderbilt's over under conference wins was going for this year, what would you put it at?
Mm, one.
They're at 1.5. So
Okay.
over
One.
one and
Oh,
a
yeah. Okay.
over 1.5 is at +155. So honestly, I like that more than I like the over 3.5 odds. 1.5 +155, which is great odds if you're going to bet your mortgage on this. I put your car. Billy says bet your mortgage on the over 3.5. Put your car over for the over 1.5. And you know what, Billy? Consider my mortgage gone because I am also following you. I'm gonna even back you up right here and say Vanderbilt gets to a bowl game this year. I like their schedule. I like everything Clark Lee is doing. Like you said, your SEC schedule starts with Kentucky and Missouri at home. I like them to split that series or one of those 2 games. I don't know which one really that they're going to take the L in and which one it's 50-50 for both games. So I'm going to have them split one of those 2 games. And then you look at Auburn. Hugh Freeze is Hugh Freeze. Some people are high on him, some people aren't. But I think Vanderbilt just goes in there and they add another win to their schedule this year. So I think they're going 6-6. Even I would not be surprised if that South Carolina game toward the end of the year. Now, this
Yeah.
might sound bitter after last year, but I also would not just be completely surprised if Vanderbilt knocks off South Carolina. I feel like that's when you're primed for an upset. Last couple games, I'm sure South Carolina, they have Clemson
Yeah.
right after that. So that's a trap game for South Carolina because they're looking ahead at Clemson, who knows where they will be at that point in their
Good
season.
point. Yeah.
But that's a trap game. That could be considered a trap game for the South Carolina Gamecocks. So I'm going. I would not be surprised if Vanderbilt. I can't wait till that line releases for that game. Cover it, the spreads and the money line for that game. But I wouldn't be. I might take Vanderbilt in that game. Toward the end of the season.
I, I I like that point. I might use that.
Yeah, that's where my head goes. Is Clemson's right after that. So South Carolina's going to have a little bit to think about going into those 2 weekends. And then you look at Tennessee. I hope it's competitive. I'm really hoping this year is competitive. I think we win again, but I really want it to be competitive. Last year, Billy, I got sick, like very, very sick, during the Tennessee Vanderbilt game. So I slept the first half, and my
You didn't
dad is
miss
a
much.
no, my dad's a very vocal fan. So I wake up to screaming, and I'm thinking, oh no, what is happening? Because I was nervous about that game. That coming out of the South Carolina loss with Hendon Hooker gone, I'm nervous about that game.
Yeah.
And then I come in and check the score, and I'm like, oh, this is bad. Like this is not where I thought this game would go. So I'm hoping the game's a little bit more competitive this year. I would love it. But yes, Vanderbilt 6-6, maybe 7-5 would not be surprised. Speaking of those gorgeous colors of orange and white, oh man, after an 11-2 season last year, coming off of an Alabama win, coming off of an LSU stomping and a Kentucky murdering, Tennessee over under 9.5. Billy, I'm gonna let you start off with the over under of 9.5 for the Vols.
I'm going over. I'm going over. This was tougher than I thought, though, just because number one, you lose Hendon Hooker, you lose Jalen Hyatt, you lose Cedric Tillman. Obviously, a lot. That's a lot of talent. And I guess they lost Jeremy Banks and maybe a couple other guys on defense. But the thing I keep going back to is Josh Heupel. I mean, what a guy! I mean, he came in to save Tennessee football, and I think no matter who he has at quarterback, as long as he doesn't have some guy that can't even throw the football, um, I think he could have won with Jarrett Garantano. I mean, I think that's how good of a coach he is. Their schedule starts off pretty light. Virginia, Austin P at Florida, UTSA. I mean, let's face it, Tennessee's going to start the season most likely 6-0 heading into that Alabama game, and that's going to be a I love that picture. That's going to be a maybe a top five matchup, probably top 10, but maybe top five CBS. And then at Kentucky, UConn, at Missouri. So it gets. I mean, Chase, I might admit this is a lighter schedule. Definitely a lighter schedule. There's some potential trip ups at Florida. UTSA is a little scary, but I still think Tennessee beats UTSA. Um, I think they're going to pound South Carolina, by the way, after last year.
I'm so ready for that. I'm so ready to beat
A
South Carolina by 80.
sleeper, a sleeper game, a sleeper game is A&M. Watch out for A&M. They could be a team that's dangerous this year. Tennessee gets them at home though. Um, UConn is UConn. They've gotten better under Jim Mora, but it's still UConn at Missouri. I mean, as long as Josh Heupel's coach, Tennessee's going to pound Missouri. Georgia, I know you've got them beating Georgia. I don't know. I think Kirby Smart is a guy that will be well prepared anytime he faces a coach like Heupel. I think this is a great game, though. I think it's a great game at Neyland. Again, this will be the CBS game. And then Vanderbilt, I've got them beating Vandy. But yeah, I've got Tennessee going 10-2. 10-2 this year, 11-2. I think they'll probably win another New Year's Six bowl. But yeah, like you said, Chase, my hope is that the Vanderbilt Tennessee game is more competitive. I mean, hell, I think everybody does. That was boring. That was awful to sit there and watch that in the pouring rain. That was miserable. So, and I think it will. I don't know. I don't think it's like a 2 or 3 score game, but it might be something like, instead of 56-0, maybe 42-14. I mean, I know we're splitting hairs there, but that'd be a step in the right direction. But no, I think that's the hope for the season, at least from the Vanderbilt perspective. But yeah, and Chase, I look at this. I think it's a lighter schedule, but I do think they go 10-2. I think they very well could go 9-3. Slip ups, like I said, at Florida, A&M at home, and then of course Georgia. But yeah, most likely 10-2, maybe 9-3. But I'll lean 10-2 over 9.5.
So, looking at this schedule, I agree with you. Tennessee, growing up as a Tennessee fan, there's always that stretch of just like there's 6 games always in their schedule that's just like, man, how are you going to get through those 6 games? Usually it's
And they've gotten
Georgia.
away from that. Yeah.
Yeah, they have gotten away from that. They moved Georgia back toward the end of the year, the last 2 games, which I love. I'm glad they're doing that. So yeah, there's not that gauntlet anymore. But if you know Tennessee, Tennessee is very prone. They even did it last year. No matter how good Tennessee is, they can't stop being Tennessee and losing games that they should absolutely win. There's always one, at least one in every season where you're going in on Saturday morning, you're thinking Tennessee, there's no shot they lose this game. And then by Saturday night, by the time you're going to bed, you don't know what happened and you are on the verge of just a meltdown. And so I'll look at Virginia. I'll be at that game. I'm so excited. I'll be at that game. It's in Nashville at Nissan Stadium. Hopefully the crowd will travel absolutely well. Austin P. Those two games are going to be blowouts. Florida, I think this is the year where we kind of these last 2 years where we start the turn of the Florida Tennessee series back to kind of us winning again. Uh, so I think we've got Florida that's on the road. I'm not too worried about Florida. A game that I'm kind of worried about, not really, but like it makes me sweat a little bit. UTSA is good. UTSA was ranked last
Hmm.
year, and they had a really good year last year, and they returned some guys from that team last year. And that UTSA coming to Knoxville, that's a big game for them. That's a big game for that program. To be able to come to Knoxville, they don't have a time for it yet on September 23rd, but that's a game Tennessee fans are probably thinking, oh, that's going to be easy. UTSA is good, and they're going to make you sweat. I don't think we lose that game. I think we win double-digit wins, but it's not going to be a stomping like you would think of a UTSA.
Yeah, there's a lot of games like that this year for Tennessee, right? Where okay, yeah, they'll probably win and they should win, but I don't know. It might be closer than you think, right? A&M, UTSA, maybe Florida. There's a bunch of games right there that if you're not careful, Milton throws a few interceptions, all of a sudden, you find yourself down. But yeah, I'm with you. I don't think it happens. I don't think it gets as close to Tennessee losing, but Tennessee's got to be careful. They need Milton. There's some pressure on Milton this year, but he's got so many good weapons that it's his job is. I mean, it's not easy, but it kind of is.
I agree, and someone made a good point. Joe's had the chance to start at Tennessee already in his career. Lost that job after he got hurt and performed poorly. Lost it at Michigan. You could argue that Michigan offense and Tennessee's offense is so far. Those are polar opposite offenses. But you could look at him up and down, and he's the prototypical what every guy wants, what every coach wants in a quarterback. Just this massive arm, big build. And you watch some of his accuracy and his decision making. Ole Miss 2 years ago, especially running out of bounds as time ran out, one of the biggest blunders I've ever seen a quarterback make. That's what scares me. And so they had their second scrimmage today, and Josh said they looked really well. Josh said that the offenses looked a lot better than last week, especially Joe. His accuracy was great this today. It's been great this week. He's been consistent. But last week, the decision making was hard for him. That's what Heupel said was kind of the biggest struggle. And Heupel has taken the coaches off the sidelines and off the field completely for these scrimmages, so they're all in the box. I think he's trying to make Joe think. And as long as Joe doesn't, I don't want to be mean. As long as Joe doesn't think, we should be fine. We should be fine in the kind of the closer games because he looked good last year against Vanderbilt and Clemson, but that Vanderbilt game was a blowout, and Clemson's secondary wasn't the best. So you're going to get tested.
Yeah,
You said a couple weeks ago that Tennessee's test was Florida. I kind of agree. I think A&M is so. I look at that A&M game, and that game makes me so nervous. That game, besides, I don't. I think that's the most nerve-wracking game that's on this schedule. A&M had a horrible year last year, but on paper they are so talented and they are so loaded. That team is five-star, almost up and down. And Jimbo, as much as I do not like Jimbo Fisher, he's got something to prove after last year, after that horrible season. That game scares me. I'm gonna go. I think, like I said, Tennessee loses to Alabama this year. We beat Georgia. The reason I think we beat Georgia, it's at home in Knoxville. Tennessee, it's a buildup sometimes with the Vols. Start slow in the early year. We get Georgia. We've always had Georgia early in the season, and they kill us because as last year we looked at it last year. You go into Stanford, it's raining, and your offense sputters. But that's early in the year. I think with the buildup of this team, the team is going to get closer together. They're going to become more bonded. Joe at that point hopefully has found his groove, and that's what I think should make Georgia fans nervous because if Joe's found his groove by Georgia with that arm and that receiving core and the running backs returning from last year on top of the like you said, Jacob Warren's coming back, that's a scary matchup for Georgia. Um, you can argue that you have a quarterback upgrade with Carson Beck, and Carson Beck looked good in garbage time last year, but Todd Monken is gone. There's a new OC in charge of that Georgia offense. So what is that going to look like? And that crowd is going to be so loud. If you thought Alabama was crazy last year, this Georgia game is going to be even.
Mm-mm-mm.
It's going to be triple last year. So I think the margin for I might sound crazy. The margin for 11-1 and 9-3 is so razor thin because I could absolutely seeing them continuing another miracle run and going 11-1, but I can also see them slipping up and going 9-3. So I'm going to meet in the middle. I'm going to go 10-2 this year. Whether who that second loss is, I will not commit to yet. I will not commit the second loss. The first loss is Alabama. Alabama gets their get back, but I can't commit to a second loss just yet. Come back to me after the South Carolina game when we beat them by 90 and how we're feeling, and I might be dumb enough to say 11-1, but I'm gonna be smart and go 10
Vols
and
by
2 this
90.
year. Vols by 90 because I can. If there's one game that I'm so looking forward to stomping a team, it's South Carolina. I hope we bury them 8 foot under, and they can't recover. That sounds so mean, but you ripped our hearts out, and it's our turn. We're gonna rip yours out, and I'm so excited. 10-2 for the Tennessee Vols. 11-2 at the end of the season because I think that they get to a bowl game. My hot take a couple months ago is Nico might start the last couple games if Joe falls off. I've kind of come back on that, and I think Nico ends up playing 4 games and redshirting. But it is what it is. I think this year is 10-2, and then next year is where we get fun because expanded playoffs, great recruiting class. But we'll go 10-2 this year. We'll be calm. We'll be smart Tennessee fans and not dumb Tennessee fans. So 10-2. Billy, that wraps up our win totals. I have them written down in a spreadsheet. So at the end of this coming season, we're going to go back and see which ones we got right and which ones we got wrong uh, before the season starts. We're almost there. We're flipping a week and a half, 10 days. I'm so excited. I'm gonna leave off.
Almost there.
I'm gonna leave off by saying Georgia, we're coming for you. Get ready. But that's gonna just about do it for us. Billy, thank you for joining us again.
You
We'll
got it.
catch you guys next week for a preview and a prediction of week 0 football. It's almost here. So see you guys. We'll see y'all next week.